Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women and our active accomplices and allies in politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder Chaminara, and today I have a really interesting and fascinating co-founder, Jackie Rhind, the co-founder of the brand Ovry. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you
Good.
for having me.
I'm really excited to talk with you. Um, because, well, you're not, so this is an episode that's not going to be explicitly political, but there are definitely political aspects in this because we are going to be talking about reproductive health and access. And all of those issues are actually political and as well as health issues. But you're more on the business side of things. So for anyone who's not familiar, and maybe I should start by saying, I reached out to you because I was offered up an ad on my Instagram feed for Ovary. And I was like, this is incredible. And it was the first time I had seen it. And I reached out to you almost like immediately and sent you a message saying, would you talk to me about your product? That's how we ended up here today. So I just want to say for anyone I mean, you're going to find out about it, but so for anyone who's not familiar with Ovary, what is this thing that you've created, this amazing thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a brand of reproductive health products. So anything from pregnancy tests, we have ovulation tests, and then we have an at-home male fertility test as well. And what makes our pregnancy and ovulation tests different than ones you would find at, the traditional pharmacy is that they are a much smaller strip format tests. So they actually use 90% less plastic. They don't generate any electronic waste. We include several per box. So if you're somebody experiencing a lot of anxiety, you can have a lot of them on hand. They're small and discreet, easier to stash in the garbage if that's what you're after. They're manufactured here in Canada, and they're a fraction of the price compared to your traditional store-bought ones that can be, $20 to $30 a piece. So we really just try and make the products more accessible because they are an important product for so many people.
And I should also mention you're in Revelstoke, which
Mm-hmm.
is in a very beautiful place in BC. For anyone who doesn't know, if you're ever driving through the Rockies, chances are you'll probably drive through Revelstoke. I definitely do when I drive from Calgary back to BC. Which makes, I think, you or your business also interesting because people can often, like people in smaller towns can also have crazy, amazing business ideas.
Totally.
And so there are so many things that I want to touch on, but like you're disrupting a market as well, which I think is astounding because for anyone who's had the experience of going and buying a pregnancy test off the shelf in a drugstore, they're really expensive. They come in a huge box. You get like one,
Mm-hmm.
and they've evolved to have those like little microchip computer kind of things in it that give you a digital display.
Mm-hmm.
But yours don't have that. And for anyone who's like, well, no, I want that certainty. You still get the certainty without the electronic display, right?
Exactly. So what the computer's doing is essentially just interpreting a strip test that is inside the big plastic casing. So it's just seeing whether there's one line, which means you're not pregnant, or two lines, which indicates pregnancy. And then it's interpreting that and then reflecting a word on the screen. So all you're doing is getting it in the form of a word versus being able to interpret it with your own eyes. And obviously, if there's visual impairment or in certain circumstances, that can be really helpful. But for the vast majority of users, it's not necessary. And in my opinion, it's kind of over engineered, and it just capitalizes on this like already vulnerable purchase experience. Like you mentioned, like a lot of folks just go in and they're going to pick the most expensive one because you just want
Mm-hmm.
it to work. But the reality is, like, these are regulated medical devices. Like, they have to work. They have to have extremely high levels of accuracy. So even the ones from the dollar store are going to serve the purpose. So that's kind of like what led me to start this business, is like the frustration and being able to see how these existing brands were capitalizing on this really vulnerable purchase experience when it didn't need to be the case, and how there just wasn't any accessible option. Like, it always felt, as you mentioned, like this really reactive process. Like, you go to the store, you fork out $30, and then you pee on it and like maybe you're hoping it's negative, and then sure enough you get
Mm-hmm.
your period a couple days later or whatever, and you've just thrown $30 in the garbage. So it's like, how can we make this more proactive, like keep them on hand, or if you're somebody going through infertility and you want that certainty of being able to check often. Yeah.
Well, and I think what also really, I mean, there were so many things that stood out to me about your, like what you're sharing about your product, about Ovary, is that depending on what stage of life you are in and what you are hoping that test result reads, and something that we definitely don't talk about enough of, especially because I think there's a lot of like shame attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like young women having sex, right? Is that
Yeah.
you want a negative test. You don't
Yeah.
always use a pregnancy test to get a positive result.
Yes.
And the shame that I think is attached to taking it so that you aren't pregnant because you, for whatever reason you might have, right? I
Yeah.
really appreciate that, because I think we need
Yeah.
to talk about that more and
Yeah.
destigmatize that aspect of our lives.
Totally. And that was very intentional as well, because as someone, so my sort of backstory and how this idea came to be is that I have this blood clotting disorder, and it's prevented me from being able to take most forms of hormonal birth control. And so I had a lot of those anxious trips to the pharmacy as a teenager, forking out the money, hoping I don't run into somebody I know, getting the negative, getting my period a couple of days later. And I I just became so frustrated too with how all the messaging, like the babies on the boxes and the single use, it sort of like talks to this one use case. Like even the commercials you saw of the young couple like celebrating their positive,
Yeah.
it was like never reflective of my personal experience, was, oh shit, this better be negative,
Negative.
you know? And like pretty often, like a few times a year, like when your period is late, which is, as we know, super common, especially for younger women. So yeah, it just that was my frustration. And then interestingly enough, I mean, not interesting, it's obvious, but when we're going to offer like a more bulk format, you're also going to appeal to folks who are struggling with infertility, for whom those boxes are also triggering, because they don't need to be reminded with the little
Yeah.
baby on the box of why they're purchasing that product, right? So there's just so much left to be desired on how not inclusive that space is in the drugstore.
100%. And your
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
packaging is really nice. Like it's very
Thank you.
modern. It's super clean. There are no babies. It's discreet, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's really clean and fresh. And I think
Yeah.
representative of what, people want to see, I'm as what I call, a Spice Girls millennial.
Yes.
Um,
I love that.
instead of saying geriatric millennial at the ripe old age of 41, right? Like it's an aesthetic,
Yeah,
as
for sure.
well. I think it also makes it much more inclusive.
Totally. Yeah. And it just doesn't have to be this like bright, horrible, massive box. Like you can just go about your business. Like you mentioned about the stigma. It's like, this is just a product. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be anything more than that.
Yeah, there's so much stigma around anything, in terms of like women's, like even, um, I can remember being, in middle school. I got my period when I was in elementary school in like grade 5, I want to say, or grade 6.
Mhm.
And I was the first person to do it. And I had such because also no one ever told me what a period. Anyways, that's like a whole other thing. But then, I had to like carry a tampon or a pad. And, I mean, I'm hoping it's changed, but you would take it out at school and you would like try to put it in your pocket as fast as you could, because you didn't want anyone to see, because you didn't want anyone to know that you were experiencing something that's
Mhm.
completely normal and a very normal
Totally.
body function. And
Mhm.
then because you don't want to get teased or made fun of it, because no one understands it,
Mhm.
not only boys, but also girls, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Just everyone. Um, and then you slip it in your pocket and then you go to the bathroom um, and I really actually really have a problem with any product that is designed to cover up tampons or pads or anything like that, because in order for our society to become more accepting and just, understand that people's bodies do things that might make you
Mhm.
uncomfortable but is completely normal, we just have to
Mhm.
like start showing it out in the open.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say like part of Ovry as well was this element of like, okay, say you live in a small town and you're like trying to conceive and you don't
Yes.
want everybody to know. It's like there is an element of discretion and privacy that I think is nice in certain contexts, but certainly not when it comes to the shame of it all. Like that's the
Yeah.
furthest we want to be from, yeah, trying to promote the product. It's like these are just normal bodily functions, like you said.
Right. Yeah. And also that depending on like where you are in your life, but like that, girls have sex just like boys
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
And that's actually totally, at least from my point of view, and now as a parent of two young boys, like I want, I'm raising them to understand, like all of these different issues, but that's kind of a different thing. But so you're disrupting the market. You are trying to become Canada's leading pregnancy test brand, but
Mhm.
also you've developed a really interesting product, which I think will be of interest to a lot of people because you've made a male fertility test,
Mhm.
and that's something that doesn't get talked about at all, really, either in the long
Mhm.
list of things is men's or, someone who contributes to the other half of pregnancy, what their
Totally.
responsibility is. And
Mhm.
also that I think you had said, because you actually pitched to Dragon's Den, and I think we'll talk about that after, but you said,
Mhm.
I think 50% of pregnancy related issues are actually a result of male infertility,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're sperm related. Mhm.
which we don't talk about
No,
because
but
I
I mean,
think
like
it's
it
the
makes
burden
sense,
is
but
on the woman, right? Or
yeah,
the person.
always.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on anyways. So if you can talk about, how you came to develop that product and around, this the role um the other
Yeah,
50% of the population.
totally. Yeah. So Ovary as a business, when we like started it, it was very foundational, like core values for us were equality. Like if you look at our logo, it's an equal sign. It's like an equal sign shifted on its head. And so it was very important that this conversation of infertility include the male partner. As you mentioned, it's not something societally that we speak much about, but statistically 50% of the time that people are struggling to conceive in hetero cis couples, it's 50% of the time it has to do with sperm related factors. So whether that's, not enough or poor quality or poor DNA, like DNA fragmentation, or they're not swimming fast enough, there's several different issues that can impact the sperm. And so it was really important to us to develop a product where we could help bring the male partner into the conversation. So this product, what it does is it detects low sperm concentration in semen, which is a leading indicator of male infertility. So sperm concentration is one of the factors. It's not, all inclusive. So, we want to be very transparent. Like this is not the same as going to a doctor and getting a full sperm analysis, which is going to look at all the factors, but it is a very good first step if you're thinking about conceiving. Maybe you're thinking about conceiving later in life. Maybe you've been like struggling to conceive for 6, 7 months and you're starting to think, okay, what's going on? You want to try and look at other things that could be happening. But more than anything, it's bringing that male partner into the conversation and saying, look, like this is a team effort here. You know what I mean? Like I'm taking my prenatals, I'm learning all the things, I'm tracking my ovulation. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's
Like
not
what?
just showing up, right? And like
Exactly.
popping into bed or wherever your place of choice
Correct.
is, right? There's actually a lot, and you just mentioned it's the prenatal vitamins, it's the,
Cycle
also,
tracking. It's the
right?
diet.
It's
It's
the
the everything.
apps, it's the everything, right? And
A
it's,
100%. It's like
it's a
you,
lot.
yeah, it's so much. And women take that burden on
Mhm.
so disproportionately.
And
And
often
to us,
almost
that seems so
entirely
unfair.
invisibly, right? Because we don't want to
Oh,
talk about it.
100%. Because a lot of people don't, exactly, people don't necessarily talk about the fact that they're trying to conceive.
Yes.
So it's like this secret journey that so many women are doing on their own while their
Mhm.
male partner just waits for them to say, okay, it's go time.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. And so, it's so important. There's so many things beyond like taking an initial test. Like, let's say you did take it and it indicated that you had low sperm concentration. That would prompt a, further consultation with a doctor and they could do like a full sperm analysis. But there's also so many lifestyle things that do impact sperm. Like, if you think about it, women are obviously born with all of our eggs, and like lifestyle things like diet and exercise are obviously very important for like a female fertility, but sperm is generated constantly. And so the impacts of lifestyle changes is actually disproportionately high for men because the fact that they're generating these sex cells every day. So you can see such a dramatic shift in the quality and the quantity of sperm between like 3 months of somebody making pretty small but impactful lifestyle changes, like quitting smoking, reducing alcohol consumption, so disproportionately as than you would with a woman making those changes. So it's shocking that we don't talk about this, because there's actually so much men can do. And yet they just, a lot of the time, like we hear this all the time, we get feedback on this product. It's like, thank God this is a product that my partner can take at home, because I've been like suggesting that he go to the doctor, but it's like such a hurdle. And there's also like an education gap, right? Like a lot of people say, well, they don't necessarily know that sperm and semen are different. They just say, oh, well, my husband has a huge load, so there must be tons of sperm in there. But just because there's a lot of semen, that doesn't actually mean that there's a lot of sex cells, which is the sperm, inside that semen. And like, it seems kind of obvious to folks that know that, but to a lot of people, they don't necessarily know that a big load does not necessarily mean big load of sperm. Anyway, so sorry if that's like a little detailed here a bit. I'm assuming nothing's TMI on this podcast.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, and like, I mean, there's so many like glaring things that are like, the failure of our education system to adequately teach us about reproductive health in every single way. There's like that aspect of it. It's the shame and stigma around men's health, or anything around like this, the machismo of like, I'm a strong man, so therefore, I can't have fertility issues because, how does that affect
masculinity,
the masculinity, whereas, so we need to talk about so many of these things like much more openly, to normalize them. And also, a lot of the things that I've gone through that have been harder in life, I've also realized, like around miscarriage, for example, I had one, before I had, 2 other pregnancies, and I had no idea that so many other women that I knew had struggled at the same time. And in some cases had gone through multiple, and we just don't talk about it. And like, to the long list of things that we need to address, and make people feel less alone in these journeys. They're not the only ones going through it, as tough as it may be, and as individual as it is. There's no, even the word miscarriage, right? Like I didn't miscarry. I wasn't, like holding it and, didn't
dropped it. Yeah,
you didn't drop it. It was a wanted pregnancy. I didn't miscarry it. It wasn't viable. Right. So the language that we use, how we engage people in this, how we talk about it transparently. I love everything about what you're doing. And bringing men into that conversation on reproduction, like even, men benefit from the invisible and unseen labor of women, either not getting pregnant or getting pregnant.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like on both sides of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The benefit to men of abortion is like something we do not talk about enough. But you're right, on both sides.
Right. And I make a sticker. Actually, do I still have it? Yes, I do. I have a sticker that says men benefit from abortion.
Yeah. I mean, I have this business because I had an abortion, and it was like not that long ago. And I'm not embarrassed to talk about it, because to me, it's just not something that I've ever thought to riddle with shame. But this business wouldn't be here. Like I got pregnant at a time that I didn't want to be, and I was doing everything right to avoid it. And I would have had to not create this business. So can change the course of someone's life.
Yeah. And that decision is yours, right? No one else's.
Absolutely.
It should be, this is the, but that as much as this is a normal conversation for you and me, right? There's still a large segment of the population that we need to bring along so that they can better understand.
For sure.
Right. That we still we should have the autonomy to make those choices, and
absolutely,
that reproductive health is access to healthcare. So I mentioned before, so you did you apply so that on the Dragon's Den piece of all of this? Because I want to talk about it because I um and would encourage anyone to actually watch it. And I'm going to link the clip, if you're okay with that, into
Yeah,
the
of course.
episode page. It's only like a few minutes long because the magic of TV.
Yes.
Um, but that was in 2023. So did you apply to go on Dragon's Den?
Yes. So I did, and I applied nearly a year before it actually aired. And I thought, oh, I'm never going to hear back. And then I got an email to do an audition, which was remote. And then I did the audition, and then they invited me to present in front of the dragons. So I did that in May of 2023, and then the episode aired in June of 2024.
Oh, wow. That's like a huge gap.
Oh yeah, huge gap. Yeah, I was like, oh, this. Yeah, it was a big, like the whole process from when I first applied to when the episode aired was probably like a year and a half.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, it was a really amazing opportunity, even though I mean,
Yeah.
spoiler, I didn't get a deal, but
Yeah.
it was incredible, and I don't regret it, and
Yeah.
I recommend any business do it.
Well, I mean, even I've thought, I was like, what if but there's no way, because I know what the answer would be.
Hmm.
And so, okay, so this leads me to say, so none of the dragons were interested in Ovary.
Hmm.
And the reasons why, I mean, like dot, 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 the men were out first.
Ugh, so disappointed in them. I was like, this is
Um,
textbook.
both of the
It's
men
like,
were
don't you
like,
have daughters?
I don't understand your business, which is like, how this is exactly part of the problem that you are trying to address, right?
Yeah,
And bringing men into the conversation on reproductive, like everything
yeah.
reproduction. So that was like a gut punch for me watching it.
Hmm.
And then the three women dragons took more time seemingly to think about it, but then they all decided to be out. And what were the reasons that they shared for deciding not to invest?
Yeah, so there was quite a bit of the show. So I was up there for probably like an hour and a half. And
Oh,
as you
really?
mentioned, yeah, they
Oh,
cut it down to like 7 minutes, right? So there's
okay.
so much that isn't seen. And they kind of have to do, understandably, they have to do a good job at like showing only the most interesting bits so that it kind of justifies the dragon's reasons for saying
Okay.
no. And so for me, where I really lost the dragons was when I started talking about my broader, larger mission,
Mm-hmm.
which was the co-op, which I'll mention in a moment. But
Yep.
interestingly, they had actually prompted me to say like, what is your big, hairy, audacious 10-year goal? But that's not in the clip.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then I told them, I was like, this is what I really would love to do with Ovry is like make it the first of its kind reproductive health cooperative, where you would have every product from your first period to your last day of menopause. And it would be a co-op. So everybody purchasing products would be an owner. And you would get basically a check in the end of at the end of the year for a shared success in the business, like a portion of the profits. Because to me, like my whole thoughts behind it is like it's strange to me that somebody's making money off tampons or making money off birth control. Like I think there should be a version of it where it's just like very transparent costing plus a small markup. And then the people that are enjoying the success of that business are the users. And I think you would actually get incredible product innovation. I think the whole business could be so interesting. But I
Mm-hmm.
know that that's not realistic to create that business tomorrow, right? Like it needs funding,
That's a
it
long-term
needs
plan.
exactly. And so, but when I had mentioned that on TV sort of briefly, I think that's when the dragons went from being like, okay, well, you have a current viable business, but then how is that going to translate over to like what is in their mind a nonprofit, even though a cooperative is not a nonprofit. A cooperative is a for-profit business. It's just owned by the users. And so they had a hard time kind of navigating like this capitalist business with this more like socialist or social enterprise vision of where I would
Mm-hmm.
like to take the business. And I think that's where I lost them, which was disappointing because I don't know, like to build a cooperative, you obviously have to start with money and like we're generating profits, like we are a profitable business. Um, and I would hope too that the women would see how interesting and how transformative a business like this could be for the access of these critical products that we just need to live every day. So that was a bit disappointing. But at the end of the day, it is a show about capitalism and making money. So
Yes.
I knew it was a risk. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was
Mhm.
interesting because in one clip in the segment, Arlene Dickinson says, I don't just want a return on my investment, I want to 3x my investment, which means
Mhm.
triple what she's putting
Yeah.
in.
Mhm.
And I was like, that was kind of another gut punch because you know, like what if you actually just believe in a business, right? And maybe you just like, I can understand, they're in the business of making money. But I think we should also be in the business of making our society better.
Yeah. Yeah. I had that
And
thought.
I don't think that makes me, and I say that as, a capitalist, a business owner,
Mhm.
who has a business that's, on more also like a social venture.
Mhm.
Um, like what's the investment on society being better? Can we 3x
Totally.
that? Can we
Yeah.
please? Can we please have that conversation?
Yeah.
Because, maybe your bank account is not going to get back bigger, but maybe the world is going to be a better place.
Totally. Or like
Like,
imagine if Canadians just had access to like cheaper reproductive health products for every stage. Like
yes.
that's just incredible. And like imagine the innovation that could come from a business. Like this is something that always bothers me is like I think about like all these brands like Tampax and whatever, they're owned by Procter and Gamble or whatever, Clorox or
Yeah.
whatever. Like they're these big conglomerates that own several different legacy brands. And it's no offense to them, but like there's no innovation in that space. Like these people aren't sitting around being like, how can we make our tampons more interesting, like more helpful to the users? Like, should we offer a customized box where you can have like online a subscription where you have 4 heavy days and 3 light and 2 medium? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how cool would that be? But it's like they're not going to innovate that. They don't care. Like they are just going to go with like what is the cheapest way to deliver the product to the user.
Yes.
So I often think about like what products aren't making it to the shelves of these stores, what products aren't making
Mm-hmm.
it to consumers. And I also think about that a lot in my personal journey of getting into wholesale. So we've had some tremendous success in the last year getting into Walmart and Shoppers Drug Mart and Rexall. And it's been this massive like 3 year battle of like trying to convince these buyers that these products are worth it. And in that, I've just often thought like, what other products aren't making it to consumers
Yeah.
because of the system that is in place? And oftentimes it'll be one buyer. Oftentimes the buyer's a male. Oftentimes you're trying to convince this male buyer, why they need a 10 pack of pregnancy tests. And they're looking at you on the other line like you're an alien. They're like, nobody would need that many. And you're like, please ask your wife or your daughter or your whatever, your best friend, like ask them if they would find that product useful. Anyway, sorry, I could like rant about this
No,
forever,
I
but
love it. I love it. I love all of this. And I think
yeah,
everyone who's listening to this will also love it.
yeah,
Because, well, and also that, that same male buyer is probably not going to be like, wow, I've never thought about my own part in reproductive health.
yes,
Give me a box of the male fertility test, right?
totally, yeah,
Well, and it
right,
was also interesting because when you mentioned in the episode of Dragon's Den, where you already are stocked,
mm-hmm.
and I saw their eyes kind of like, at least in the episode, they made it look like they were like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I could tell it was when you started talking about the cooperative aspect of it that they were like, and that was like well, how am I going to get my money? I want
Mm-hmm.
more money. Um, and, I think language also, if you hadn't said cooperative,
I
maybe like
know,
membership
I
or
know,
something, like, because I think cooperative just has kind of like a socialist
yeah.
thing to
Yeah, I've
it.
had a lot of like thoughts back on it. I'm like, wow, like the tweaking of a few words really could have impacted the outcome there. But
Yeah.
ultimately, like I'm sure you can understand this. There's like the integrity that you have to have as a
Yes.
business owner and being true to,
100%.
yeah, exactly. Just like the true to
Yeah.
what you see as the mission of your business. And it didn't feel right to go on national TV and just like lie to get a deal. And then they would
Yeah.
find out eventually when I'd be
Well, because
like,
they would have
okay, I'm going
done,
to use this money
they
for this.
do due diligence afterwards, right? And deals can
Right.
still fall
Yeah.
apart
Hmm.
after you go on one of their shows and
Yeah.
you decide to part ways.
Hmm.
But and then I'm not sure his name, but one of the male dragons was like said something like, maybe we're all going to be wrong about this, and you know.
Yeah, I thought that was nice at the end. Yeah, it was
And
West Hall.
honestly, I was like,
Yeah.
yes. Fuck
Yeah.
yes. You
Yeah.
need to, I want that for you. I want you
Hmm.
to put them all,
Yeah.
to shame because, it was their lack of understanding.
Hmm.
And I think it was just so
I
frustrating.
have a good track record of proving people wrong. So I enjoyed that when I
Yeah.
walked it back because
I
I didn't
want that
hear
for
it.
you so badly.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't
Yes.
hear it when I was physically there. Probably because I was like crutching off the stage because I had just had knee surgery. So I was like trying to not trip. I was like, okay. And I had been up there for an hour and a half and my leg was so swollen. I was like, I need to
That's
get off
a
the stage.
really long time. I had no
Yeah.
idea.
Maybe it was like an hour
That's
and 15, but it was a long time, longer than seven
still,
minutes.
still.
Yeah.
And honestly, like if you had been from a gendered lens, if you had been a male founder, I honestly like, and you were presenting just the male fertility test and talked about it in that membership kind of way, like I just
Hmm.
can see, I can see them having been like so interested in being like, this is going to change the market and right.
Yeah. It's been interesting. I will say, like in pitching to different investors and Dragon's Den and just like generally putting myself out there in the last few years of growing this business, I've I've learned that how I present myself actually matters, which is so like duh. But people expect when you're this business owner or you're in startup culture, like hustle culture, they expect you to be super confident, super like have so much
Yeah.
conviction in your idea, like walk in there and know that you're going to 10x this business. And it's like so not natural to me. I mean, I think so many women struggle with imposter syndrome and just like generally, I feel like we have to work so hard and we often do so well, but it's because we're working extra hard because we just don't have the grace to make mistakes in the same way that men do in certain roles and capacities.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've really had to almost put on this like mask a bit of just like feeling more confident in my ideas and my business. And that was like another moment during Dragon's Den where I was like, okay, you still have some work to do because you clearly didn't do a good enough job. Like if I had walked in there with more, I want to call it arrogance, even though that's like not a positive word, but truly like when you go in there and you know that you have, because my business is good, like on paper, the growth, the success we've had, it's like, I know I'm building something that
Yeah.
is worth investing in. I just
Mhm.
didn't do a good enough job at
Well,
conveying that.
I think
Anyways.
having watched the episode, I mean, honestly, I thought it was, I mean, I was so impressed. And I
Thank you.
think that, that's the story I hear from female founders so often. I was in a meeting last week with women in business. And even before that, I was talking with another friend who's a founder. And this one friend was like, I've presented to over 100 VC meetings. Like and every single one of them has been no, or a clip of another founder I know from Calgary, Bobby Racette, who started the company Virtual Gurus, shared in a video. Actually, I reshared it not long ago on Instagram. Anyways, it's on her page, around having a meeting with a VC. And the guy was like, you know what, I don't want to hear about or something. I'm not going to do it justice, but like, I don't want to hear, beside like Lee, you don't have to mention the part that you're gay or the part that you're a woman. Like, just give me the business, right? And
Interesting.
she said in the clip, she was like, and that's when I knew that he didn't understand me or my business because those
Mm-hmm.
aspects of it are like, that is who we are, right? We build those
Mm-hmm.
into our business. Like even my own business, it is very personal. Like I put
Mm-hmm.
myself into it, you put yourself into it. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
difference is that people who are investors and the world in general need to understand that we're building businesses differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a
Totally.
generational shift and it's not going to be as clean or as, straight. Like it is very much more the personal element and we're sharing our personal
Absolutely.
stories around how we got to making what we make.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Like, sort of back to what I was saying about that, like how I feel like in certain contexts, I almost have to make myself have this different
Yeah.
personality to convince people. But it's such a shame because we have different strengths, right? Like we know
Mm-hmm.
statistically that companies that are run by female CEOs outperform companies run by men. And when they do all the research behind it, like often the reason is because we are slightly more risk averse, right? We're slightly more cautious. And in the long run, that can benefit the company, right? And so, like, as you said, the fact that we're running businesses differently, that we understand the psychology of our users, and that like we're building them more slowly, maybe, or more intentionally in some cases, it doesn't mean it's like a weakness.
Yeah.
It's just like we maybe understand our audience different, or this is what's more comfortable to us, but doesn't mean we can't build really good, strong, successful businesses.
Well, and it's interesting going back to what you had said about, the conglomerates who are, the manufacturers of, for example, tampons and pads. The innovation that we see isn't on the product side, right? It's on the marketing side. That's where
Always.
they're
Yeah.
that's where they're innovating, because they've gone away from using the blue dye dropper, right, in commercials, because like
Yeah.
no one bleeds blue
Yeah.
water,
Yeah.
to using red, right, to
Yeah.
actually represent that it's like blood.
Yeah.
And it's on, period underwear, or so like none of these products are like tampons and pads aren't being revolutionized in any way. It's
No.
simply the marketing, and it's about
100%.
being more transparent and just being more like not only transparent but explicit in what these products actually do. And that's what women and people in this category want, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
They just want to be seen. So the
Totally.
fact that, like it's, and, these ad campaigns like win awards, and it's like, then they're lauded in the media for being so revolutionary. And it's like, well, actually, this is just
That's just what it should have been. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Right. There's nothing, but because we're just, talking about things in a way that actually explains them or shows them for what they are. Like heaven forbid, also something that drives me crazy. I listen to like a lot of talk radio, which also makes me very angry. But anyways, there are ads all the time for Viagra, all the
Right.
time, and all the time, like for
Mm-hmm.
clinics, for products, for injections, like all of these different things. You never hear ads for anything related to women's health, right? If it's
Mm-hmm.
menopause, if it's periods, if it's like anything related to menstruation, if it's around fertility, right? And if it is
Mm-hmm.
related to fertility, it's always on the like, on the baby thing. It's not the
Yeah.
you went home with someone last night and you want to make sure you're actually not pregnant.
Right. Yeah. That's so interesting too, because we know that the side effects from Viagra, like there are more negative outcomes from taking Viagra than there are from taking the chemical abortion pills. And yet nobody talks about that, right? Like people talk often about how dangerous these are. Often, people who aren't informed will say like, oh, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to prevent yourself from being able to be able to get pregnant in the future if you take this, but that's not informed in science. And
Yeah, no
meanwhile,
one's
when you
saying
look at the
that to
side effects,
men, right?
yeah,
No
totally.
one is saying that to
Yeah,
men. Meanwhile, they're being actually encouraged to like pop them like candy,
totally.
when they could actually be the barrier to someone's fertility journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the onus is put on the other half of the partnership around, why aren't you able to have kids? Well, talk to
Right.
Bob. Maybe Bob,
Yeah.
Bob, Bob needs to take it easy on something else.
Right.
Um, so something else that I thought was really interesting before we wrap up was like you have obviously done like your ability to get this product into stores nationwide. So for anyone listening, what stores are you available
So
in
we're
Canada?
in Canada. We're available in all Rexalls, most Walmarts. Our male fertility test is available in all Shoppers Drug Mart, and our pregnancy test strips are available in select Shoppers Drug Mart. So you'd have to go into our store locator to find which ones.
Okay.
We're also in all Jean Coutu's in Quebec, and in select Metro pharmacies as well, and all London Drugs in Western Canada.
Okay.
We have a store locator on our website, so it's really handy if you're just like put in your address and see which stores near you carry Ovry. But you can also go on our website. We offer free shipping for all orders over $25, and our website is myovary.ca.
And are you still shipping out of do things ship out of Revelstoke?
No, so all our products are manufactured just outside of Vancouver in Surrey. And so we
Okay.
have distribution centers in Western Canada and Ontario so that we can ensure like really, really super fast shipping times.
That's
So if you order
amazing.
online, you will get it in a couple days, unless you live in like the boonies, in which case you'd have to give us 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. But you ship everywhere in Canada. So someone
Yep.
even in Nunavut
Yep.
could access your
100%.
product.
Yeah.
That's
And we've
amazing.
actually like subsidized shipping to northern uh, territories so that we can offer it, making it more accessible because we know that that's an additional barrier.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a goosebumps moment for me because also on the small business side, people don't understand how we often subsidize shipping, but also
Yes.
the pain and the frustration and the cost of people who live in rural and remote areas, which actually don't even have to be what we think of as rural and remote,
Yes,
but
true.
Canada Post thinks of as rural and remote.
Yes, yeah.
It's there's an equity that's an equity and equality issue too for people in different
Mhm.
communities.
For sure.
Also, because of the lack of access to abortion as healthcare in more outside of large urban centers, like your products, I think, become an even more critical part because
Hmm.
people can't just pop into, like, even you in
Hmm.
Revelstoke, right?
Hmm.
You would either, Calgary is actually closer than Vancouver, or Kelowna, I guess would be.
Hmm. Clone would be
Um,
the closest, yeah.
yeah. But that's still like a big trek for you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And
Thank you for
for,
reaching out.
yeah, no. And so what is your website?
So our website is myovary.ca.
And it's
Some people,
Ovry.
yeah, so myovry.ca. And the brand is actually just Ovry, but I was too cheap to buy the domain. And boy, do I regret it because now everybody thinks the company is called My Ovary, but it's just Ovary. But the
Oh,
website is My Ovary. Anyways, whole
okay.
thing.
Well, those things
All,
happen.
yeah,
So,
all good.
okay. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much, Sarah.